Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 5 of the Off the Cuff podcast, a Grassroots Cricket original podcast in which we rant. I'm your host, Behram Qazi, and you can find me at Def Mango on Twitter. And with me today to talk on the disparity of Test cricket or in Test cricket, I have with me Caribbean Cricket Podcast's very own Machel St Patrick Hewitt. Mash, how you doing?
I'm very, very good and delighted to be on the Off the Cuff podcast. I'm glad you said rant in because that's what you're going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were actually my number one pick when I was thinking of a guest to discuss this topic because very recently we saw the West Indies draw a test series in Australia 1-1. It was a very inexperienced team. They had about 7 uncapped players, 4 of them debuted during the series, and they went on to defeat Australia in a test match at the Gabba, where no one else other than India has defeated them in decades. And the West Indies hadn't defeated Australia in a test match in 21 years. The last one before this being Ramnaresh Sawan's epic chase of 418. And also their first win in Australia since 97 at the WACA. And it's all a great fairy tale, of course. Shamar Joseph's story is one that needs to be celebrated over and over and over again. But we saw a lot of tweets in which, people said the usual stuff of how a healthy and strong West Indies is great for cricket, and that they should be competing or whatever. All of that fairy tale stuff, and people saying this might be the dawn of a new era. But we all know that none of that is going to happen unless the way Test cricket is run and the dynamics of the finances and the economics of Test cricket, the way they work. If that doesn't change, then this is just going to be more of the same. It's going to be an anomaly, a one-off, and nothing will really come off of this team, which has done really, really well. But yeah, they're not particularly set up for success, are they?
No, and I make you completely right. And I'm always mindful how I respond in these kind of situations because I think people sometimes get the wrong end of the stick and will say, "Oh, you're being negative about the potential of the West Indies cricket setup, whether men, women, age group cricket, 18 cricket, whatever it might be, right?" But we've been here before. Now, granted, in this particular scenario, no one would have expected an away test win in Australia, right?
Mhm.
But I'm going to remind people that I think back in 2016-17, we won a test in UAE against Pakistan, and that wasn't
Yes.
expected either. I think we lost the
Mhm.
series 2-1, but we won away versus Pakistan. And I remember at the time it was like, wow, that hasn't happened in a long time. Maybe
Mm.
West Indies are back. When we beat England in 2019 at home and then beat them again most recently in
Mm.
2022, everyone said, wow, okay, West Indies are back. So when we took tests away from home against England and lost the series 2-1 on both previous occasions that we've gone there, again, people said,
Mm.
wow, maybe this is a dawn for the West Indies. The simple reality for me is this: when you are a side with a very limited piece of the pie,
Mhm.
and there are teams beneath the West Indies, to full member teams, Ireland, Afghanistan, with even less of the pie than us, right? You are always going to your general path is going to be lots of underachievement, followed by every now and again a huge giant killing. That's
Mm.
every sport. Put any team in the West Indies context in any major sport, football, basketball, whatever, it will follow a similar pattern, right?
Mm.
Where you will generally underachieve. Every now and again, you'll pull off a result that nobody sees coming. And then you go back to the norm again because the circumstances around you do not allow you to have sustained success at the top. And I think where the West Indies situation is slightly different to all other full member sides, and or if you want to include associates, is that I think people often get confused with how they view the West Indies
Mm.
because of their former history. So even though everyone's like, oh, we shouldn't harper back to what they used to be, that's effectively what everybody does in
Mm.
analyzing anything and everything the West Indies do. So everyone's always pining for this. Is this the return to the glory years? Whereas my attitude has always been, we've had our time. We had our cycle when we dominated. And don't get me wrong, Behram, it may well come back again. It may well. I
Mm.
don't know how old I'll be. It may well come back again, but in the modern day context of cricket, for that to ever come back again, there would have to be a level playing field off the
Yeah.
pitch, and I don't think it's negative or harsh to say it. I think it's actually just looking at the reality of,
Yeah, yeah.
of the
It's
situation.
very fair to comment on that. I believe I don't think, or I don't see how that is negative because look, you mentioned the Devendra Bishu masterclass in the UAE. Of course, I remember that. Of course, the West Indies always somehow managed to defeat England at home and even away. We remember those twin hundreds by Shea Hope. I believe it was
Mm,
Headingley, if I'm not wrong. But they always do pull out that surprise win, and there'll be lows. You know, they failed to qualify for the ODI World Cup right now. There are people, many people in the industry, most notably recently Vikrant Gupta from India. He commented how West Indies should disband into, individual island nation, sides, and maybe then they'll have the motivation. That word motivation, that's what bothers me. Because
mm.
here you had a group of players, right? They had very limited experience. If you take Kemar Roach, Craig Brathwaite, maybe Joshua De Silva, might be forgetting someone over here, but just 3 to 4 guys, you take them out, and you have a side which has barely played first class cricket, let alone test cricket, right? They're very, very new to the arena. And they've gone on and pulled off something spectacular. While it does need to be celebrated, all of these calls for, oh, this might be the start of a new era for the West Indies, like you mentioned, and West Indies, a healthier team is better for world cricket. What does world cricket do for the West Indies? They don't particularly help them, do they? And you talked about a slice of the pie. Why do we live in a world where the inequity is such that ever since the big three monopoly came into place, more specifically in 2014, you have these great stories here and there. Misbah lifted the mace, not playing test cricket at home, Pakistan are playing in the UAE. And then Kane Williamson actually won New Zealand the World Test Championship. These are instances, but in the long run, in terms of sustainability, it's simply going to be skewed. It's not going to be a level playing field at all. And how much does this bother you? And how much does this exhaust you hearing the same narrative over and over again, only for it to fall on deaf ears?
I think the world of cricket. If actually no, I was about to say the world of cricket. Do you know what? The whoever people deem to be the real decision makers in the world of
Hmm.
cricket, and I won't fill in the gaps. I'll let your listeners decide who they believe are the real lever pullers and decision makers when it comes to world cricket. One thing I will tell you now, it's not Kishore Shallow, president of Cricket West Indies. I know that much right now. Okay,
Hmm.
whoever the lever pullers are, they just need to make it. I just want them to be honest, right?
Hmm.
I want them to be honest about where they see world cricket going and what they see the purpose of international cricket as. I just want them to be honest. Is it that they want international cricket to be a competitive industry game where the game grows and more teams can play international matches and there's a level of unpredictability about international cricket in the same way how in international football, yes, some teams come from first world nations and you
Hmm.
largely expect them to be the ones that will win things, but there's still a level of unpredictability, right?
Yeah.
Is and how FIFA share out. FIFA gets a lot of criticism, but there's a there's a certain level of development funding and how they administer the game that at least includes everybody,
Hmm.
right? So
Absolutely.
I I'd like the lever pullers to decide and let the whole kind of cricketing fraternity know where do they see international cricket in 20 years' time.
Hmm.
How would they like it to play out? Do they feel happy knowing that at the moment in time, it is heavily skewed to the benefit of three teams and generally speaking, nobody else. And to be
Hmm.
fair, if they were to come out and say that's how we want it to be, I've got no problem because at least then they're being honest and they're saying this is what we actually want it to be, right?
Yeah.
If they're going to say that they don't want it to be like that and they want the game to grow and they want a level of competitiveness, then the natural conclusion is you have to look at how the game is currently set up
Hmm.
and work out is the stewardship over the game effective in creating a competitive game. And I'm not saying that that means that England, Australia, and India must be beaten all the time, but I am saying that you can certainly level things up slightly. Um, I don't know. It's hard because what you often find on, and obviously beware of social media, it tends to kind of draw out the most extreme of people, but there are some people on there with sense, right? And what people often say is, well, individual cricket boards should find their own sponsorship and they should be able to grow the game in their region themselves, and they should be able to negotiate their own TV deals, and it's their fault if money's not coming into their game, right? And I'm
Mm.
always perplexed at how people are. I'm always perplexed at how people kind of believe it's that simple. I mean, in the context of cricket, and specifically in the West Indian context, where we're not one nation. We're not
Mm.
we're not one nation. We barely we are just traveling in our own region is so expensive, and I don't think people understand that. Getting from
Yeah.
Jamaica, my homeland, to Barbados will cost you 600 UK pounds. Like, come on, what other nation in cricket has to deal with things like that? That doesn't it doesn't make sense what people are asking for.
Yeah, and I mean, with respect to slices of the pie and all of that, forget test nations, right? Sure, there is
Mm.
a major disparity and inequity in the game, but you talk about associate nations, what is being done to help them grow, and where do you want to see test cricket to go from here? Because let's put all of the financial and economic aspect of things to one side, okay? All teams don't play the same number of games. The players
Mhm.
that play test cricket, whatever nation they belong to, whatever board has employed them, they pay them differently. A lot of players, for top teams even, because look at South Africa, right? They're at a point in their cricketing history where they actually have to opt for the SA20 over test cricket right now if they want to survive financially. It's not on
Mhm.
them, it's the way the game is run. We talk about the proliferation of T20 cricket and how the West Indies in particular has lost a lot of players to franchise T20s. You can't blame these players because they've got limited shelf lives, right? And
Mm.
they need to think about where their money is going to come and how much they can possibly make in a limited amount of time. So, how do we fix this is something maybe the people who run the game need to answer. But this whole beautification of how beautiful test cricket is, and oh, it's so amazing, this is what cricket should be, we should have more of these games, there's no real buy-in from the people who run the game to fix that. It only gets more skewed year after year, and you'd think, or conventional wisdom at least suggests, that the longer this continues to go on, the more skewed it'll become. Because you have these one off stories here and there right now, because cricket wasn't always run the same way. But if you take up most of the revenue from the game that is being generated, then of course, like, there will be that disparity. It kind of comes with the territory. And yeah, I mean, it's just really unfortunate because we all do enjoy watching test cricket. And I'm sure you don't want to watch Shamar Joseph play for Peshawar Zalmi. You want him to play for the West Indies as much as he can. Look at Jason Holder's example. Blood, sweat, and tears given to West Indies cricket. Captain decide for so long, literally gave it everything or left everything out on the field. And now he's opted for the paycheck. He gave that interview to Wisden, right? It's like brutally honest. That's literally where we're at. And it's just really tragic that everyone seems to be fine with this.
Yeah, and there has to be. It kind of feels like the analogy I always use is it kind of feels like the toothpaste is out of the tube, and
Hmm.
nobody has any idea of what to do to put it back in, and it's almost like we're moving from one stage to another. Everyone's tutting their head, everyone's saying the same thing over and over again, which is, well, this isn't healthy. How is this going to improve the game? But play, we kind of trot the same lines out. Players have a right to make their money, which is all correct. This isn't healthy
Yep.
for the world game, which is all correct. How this isn't creating a competitive playing field, which is all correct. But nobody's doing anything. So
Hmm.
so so and that's where I make Jason Holder right to say, well, we can't just keep going on like this, and
Yeah.
he's correct to do so, or to say so, I should say. But nobody wants to take ownership over the situation. It smacks of head in the sand. It smacks of, oh, it will all work itself out.
Hmm.
But it we don't seem to be working anything out right about now. Now, I said something about 2 years ago on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast channels, whichever one of the mediums. I said that we were heading to a stage. Now, this literally was 2 years ago. I said we were heading to a stage where international cricket outside of World Cups was effectively just going to turn into India, Australia, and England playing each other, and
Hmm.
those would be marquee, and those would be treated as the real marquee matches, and everything else was just a distraction. I think we're here. I think we're here
Hmm.
already. Look at how India versus England is being marketed. It's being marketed like it's an Ashes game or an Ashes
Yeah.
series, right? When India go to Australia, it'll be marketed like it's an Ashes series. Similarly, when India go to England and Australia go to India, it is clearly there is a disparity in
Hmm.
how those games are being marketed versus how everything else is being marketed. And then we have this fallacy of a World Test Championship where
Yeah.
teams don't even play the same number of games in the World Test Championship,
Mhm. I
don't play
think
the
it's the
same number
only
of series.
tournament in the world, maybe only, championship in the world where all teams don't play the same number of games. Because if you look at the English Premier League, right, of course you'll
Mm,
have the rich clubs like Chelsea or Manchester United or whatever. But even Luton is getting to play the same number of teams and same number of games as those guys. And that is how you expect Luton to maybe someday be better, even if the finances are not on the side. If you don't ensure the same number of games, how do you expect the game to grow? How do you expect Shaheen Afridi to reach Mitchell Stark's level if Mitchell Stark is playing 10 test matches a year and Shaheen is playing five?
yeah. 100%. And I was even going to call the World Super League. The World Super
Hmm.
League was an actually good idea, right? Last, not last summer now. Was it last summer or was it 2 summers ago now? 2 summers ago. I can't even remember. Cricket moves so fast. But I went to the Netherlands series when West Indies played the Netherlands away. I went away for that. And obviously that was part of the then World ODI Championship or ODI Super League, I should say. And those games mattered. It meant
Hmm.
something. And most importantly of all, look what happened when we got to World Cup qualifiers. The Netherlands were the team who got through, and I
Yeah.
always say to people, undoubtedly, when we got to those World Cup qualifiers, one of the reasons why the Netherlands made it through is because they were in the ODI Super League for the 2 year period, and
Hmm.
undoubtedly that exposure of playing full member nations or top tier sides helped them. It didn't matter that they took L upon L upon L. They were battle ready by the time it came round to the ODI World Cup qualifiers, I should say. And what's happened now? The ODI Super League has been scrapped as a concept. So so
Hmm.
even when cricket gets it right, they spectacularly then get it wrong straight
Yeah.
after that. So again, returning kind of circling back round to the initial point, is this where cricket is going then? That India, England, and Australia have 5 match or 4 match series or whatever they are. They're marketed as the big main event, and then they reluctantly go to other teams to just fulfill some kind of deals just to make sure those teams can stay afloat, but
Hmm.
never actually be any good. If that makes sense, like I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss because we've had column inches upon column inches all around the world of Shamar Joseph. West Indies are still on earth in talent. 5 years from now, how many test matches will Shamar Joseph have played? If we're just using test cricket as an example, how many ODIs will he even have played, right? Whereas, so let's compare. I think what I would ask everybody to do listening to this is take down today's date, which is we're recording this on the 4th of February, 2024. By 2029, count how many international matches Shamar Joseph has played. He's only 24, so count how many international matches Shamar Joseph has played 5 years from now, and find another debutant somewhere in world cricket. There's a lot of international cricket going on at the moment. So whether New Zealand, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, India, England, obviously we had Australia, West Indies. Pick someone. Pakistan played
Hmm.
Australia. Pick someone who's just made an international debut and compare how many games they played compared to Shamar Joseph, and that will tell you where world cricket is going.
Yeah, and I think one of the very valid points you made over here is that of exposure and how you gave the analogy of the Netherlands. Literally, they got some home series versus top nations and you saw them qualify for a World Cup. That's how much exposure can do for you. And, T20s aside, because I still feel like it's easier for associate nations to come, and do wonders in that format because it's a shorter format, it's played more frequently, and there's a larger percentage of, chances of you upsetting another nation, right? But when it comes
Mm,
to the longer formats, I think that I'll come back again to the slice of the pie thing because when you are getting only a certain amount of revenue and your cricket is heavily reliant on T20s, because even for Pakistan, for example, the PSL is the cash cow. SAT20 is of South Africa's cash cow right now, and they've sent a depleted side to play New Zealand as part of the World Test Championship cycle. They're probably not going to fare too well over there, or maybe they will, because there are talented players in these nations. The West Indies
Mm,
have literally proven that by defeating Australia at the Gabba, right? It's
mhm.
not just Joseph. You've got your Kevin Sinclairs, Kevin Hodges, and I was quite impressed with Kirk McKenzie as well. You've got these talented players, but if there is no sustainable way to motivate them and encourage them to play the longer format, it's inevitable for them to go and play T20s and franchise T20s. And even on a regional level, for instance, in Pakistan right now, they split up the uh, first class domestic competitions into the Qaid Azam Trophy, which has kind of always been there, and then a more cash rich trophy called the President's Trophy, in which departments play each other. So banks, basically, and other gas pipeline institutions, whatever. No one has any interest in that, right? But at least you have these competitions. And then you get the Sindh Premier League, where they schedule it at a point where you have to postpone the final of your marquee first class tournament to make way for the T21. And then you're saying the players are choosing leagues over their country. This is such a lazy argument at this point.
Mm.
Pakistan's giving the board is giving the players a lot of trouble with respect to NOCs, and they're putting stipulations on them. Well, for starters, pay them well, give them more lucrative contacts. I feel like a players union needs to exist. There needs to be transparent communication. There needs to be good medical care. You're not giving your players these things. They're inevitably going to go towards places which are providing these things for them. But just on this note, I want to kind of get a deeper understanding from you of what is the regional level first class cricket structure like in the Caribbean, because is there something over there where players will be motivated to go and play the longer format, or is it just T20 or bust as we stand?
Okay, so everything I say next is purely, a lot of it will be my opinion, but I'll give the facts around the opinion. So let's deal with the
Mm-hmm.
facts first and foremost. The way the domestic system is set up in the Caribbean is that there are six. No, sorry, that's a lie. Actually, there's now eight. There's eight franchise teams in the within the West Indies structure. So that's the Barbados. But remember, we're countries. That's part
Mm-hmm.
of our structure. So people have to remember that as well. So Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, the Windward Islands, the Leeward Islands, now the West Indies Academy, which has been set up within the last year and a half, and the combined campuses and colleges team, which is supposed to be made up of players who are studying at one of the universities, but technically could be a professional cricketer. It's very vague how that team works, but that's kind of that's what it's supposed to be. Now, within those eight teams, you have several players who are contracted to those franchises who get what we call regional retainer contracts from cricket. So Cricket West Indies provides all the funds for this, right? So let's just say that each nation gives a regional retainer contract to about 20 players. So you're looking at somewhere in the region of um, a minimum of 120 to 140 players who get some kind of regional retainer contract. And that means that when your nation is playing, or team, if you want to include West Indies Academy, you are being paid day in, day out to be a professional cricketer. Now, before people say to me, so why are the players so bad then? That's because, and we may not get into it today, but that's when you start to look at things like, well, what are the facilities like, which are substandard compared to pretty much every other full member nation, right? So you're talking about things like the facilities, the strength and conditioning, all of that stuff is substandard, right? Now, if you are a West Indies international, you get a Cricket West Indies retainer contract. And that covers all formats. So it used to be split into white ball, red ball. Now it's just a contract. You just get one. So that's why that's why there was big news a couple of days ago when Cricket West Indies unexpectedly said now Shamar Joseph has one. Because what they tend to do is every year in October, they say, right, here are the new list of 20 players or however many it is who have retainer contracts for the next year to play for the West Indies. Now, with those retainer contracts, you are in theory supposed to be available whenever the West Indies are playing if you are then selected. And that's why there was such an issue over the Australia series, because someone like Shea Hope has a retainer contract, but Shea Hope declined selection to play test matches to go play I think it was the Bangladesh Premier League. Can't remember which one he was playing in. Right now,
I mean, there are four going on right
obviously,
now, so must be one
right,
of
yeah,
them.
right, exactly. So obviously now he's in Australia because he's captain of the ODI side. So he's come back for that, but declined selection to the test side. And the reason I bring something like that up is because sometimes people say to me, "Well, why doesn't the West Indies just don't issue the NOC, and therefore these players can't go because they've got a contract, right?" But the West Indies board are very reluctant to get into what I think is going to be like. Obviously, we saw Afghanistan did it. I don't know where Pakistan stand on it, but
Mhm.
they're very reluctant to enter into the legal ramifications of something like that, where you say, "Well, you're just not going. You're not going to. We're not giving you that chance to go and earn a living elsewhere. We've given you a central contract which is worth somewhere in the region of $250,000 a year, right?" Um, Now, what people then have to understand I'm trying to give a synopsis of this. What people then have to understand is because that the Cricket West Indies central contract, their argument is they don't play any cricket during CPL. So their
Mhm.
argument would be to West Indies players, if you have a central contract and we don't play international cricket during CPL because that's our home tournament, most of you have central contracts will get a CPL contract. So over the year, as a minimum, you're making somewhere probably in the region of $400,000 to $450,000 from your
Mhm.
domestic T20 tournament as a minimum. I'm saying your domestic T20 tournament and your central contract with Cricket West Indies. And of course, we don't play any matches during IPL. So if there are any of the IPL players there, yeah, they can go make their money there. So this
Yeah.
is why Johnny Grave in a recent podcast was saying, well, actually, there's this notion that West Indian players aren't paid well. If you're a top tier player, you're probably making about 500K a year. Now, the question every player has to ask themselves is that enough for the lifestyle I am trying to lead? Is that enough to set my family up? Is that enough to establish generational wealth for my family? And they're probably saying
Mm.
no, because there's 1 million T20 leagues throughout the rest of the year where they can up their money. So,
Yeah.
and with respect, a lot of our players come from, Shamar Joseph being an example, come from impoverished backgrounds. And we
Mm.
can't be, as you said earlier on, who are we to turn around and say, don't go and make some more money, sacrifice your whole career for, for the West Indies team? And sorry, and the reason why it's important to kind of straight state this is to understand the disparity between West Indies and therefore the top three. Joe Root, just to use Joe Root as an example, he can afford to not play T20 cricket because his
Yeah.
central contract with England is what? I think it's 1.5 million or something like
Uh,
that. Now,
Something
respectfully,
like that. I
yeah,
mean, look at
so
Mitchell Stark, right? Mitchell
yeah,
Stark was not playing the IPL for so many years because the Australian Cricket Board would subsidize him and basically say, hey, take this money, don't play the IPL. And now he's pretty much made it the best of both worlds by bagging the most lucrative contract in history or auction
yeah,
price. So, yeah, I mean, you have those things over there where the more well endowed cricket boards can afford to hold on to their players for national duty, whereas teams which aren't as well off or the boards which aren't as well off cannot simply do that.
yeah. And fundamentally, again, just to make sure that people understand, not to get into misnomers around this, it's not a case of West Indies just finding more money, because where are they going to find it from when
Hmm.
they have to fund a women's team, a men's team, that's senior, the age group sides, and then again, I must explain to people, they have to split the money that they make amongst what is it, 16? Not yeah, is it 16 different nations? Probably more,
Hmm.
but effectively six different affiliate boards. So a piece of pie goes to Barbados, a piece of pie goes to Jamaica, and those boards, cricket boards, then have to fund cricket within their nation. So I think people don't understand sometimes that West Indies cricket isn't one cohesive cricket nation. It's it's a private entity trying to fund cricket across several islands. And bear in mind as well, those islands don't have to listen to Cricket West Indies because Cricket West Indies is a private entity. So they get the money, but there's no kind of like, and now you are going to tell us what we do with that money, because that money is for their country. And that those
Yeah.
cricket boards will decide what is best for their country. So, and if that means they're going to run a Dream 11 T10 tournament that does nothing to really benefit anything long term in West Indies cricket, it'll make some players some more money and it'll help the people that love to bet on those kind of things, but it's not really fundamentally helping anybody in terms of the wider joined up thinking of West Indies cricket. So we're stuck in a loop. We're stuck
Yeah.
in a loop trying our best to make ends meet. And as Johnny Graves said the other day, still paying for all of our teams to travel abroad. So we're in Australia at the moment and we've made no money off that tour whatsoever. But
Hmm.
we've honoured the commitment of going there for a multi-format tour to make no money when we don't have the money really to be doing stuff like this.
Hmm.
So when people say why should there be a greater share of the pie, well, I'd like to think I've given you 100 reasons.
Yeah, that is quite a grave reality, puns intended. But yeah, I mean, it's the more you talk about it, the more you realize how we're stuck in this abyss where there is no ladder which can be climbed and you can actually, go higher, because it's a very layered conversation, and there's not just one simple solution. And I mean, West Indies isn't even the only nation or test nation at this point struggling with this. Of course, I mentioned how Pakistan has had NOC trouble. Afghanistan had NOC trouble too, right? And here's a
Mhm.
country where they, what, you expect their players not to play those leagues? That's how they're being developed. Forget,
Yeah,
like, the finances and everything, and forget commitment to Afghanistan. They literally, Afghanistan has a team because of franchise T20 cricket. Maybe they
yeah.
wouldn't have as good a team without it. So cricket is in a very precarious spot, and I feel like, yeah, I'm going to make a reel of that thing where you said we'll note down the date of today and come back 5 years later. I really would like to see where we're at in 5 years time, but let's get into some hypotheticals. I know this is all going to sound like a pipe dream because none of it is ever going to happen, Mash, but let's just kind of hypothesize about what could potentially save test cricket or end the disparity, at least equal number of
Mhm.
games, obviously. A lot of people in the industry, and some people who have balanced views and actually care about the sport and want it to be competitive, they've proposed how there should be a dedicated window for test cricket, and there should be a league structure and equal numbers of games for each team, obviously equal pay for the players within that league structure, because then it's the league that's making the money, just pretty much like the Premier League or something. And then also it could be a two-tiered structure, because you've got
Yeah,
around, like, what, 12 nations in test cricket right now. Have like a six nation per tier sort of tiered structure with promotion and relegation. The bottom ranked team from tier one goes down to tier two, and whoever wins tier two goes up to tier one. Do you think that that is a feasible solution to help fix this mess that we find ourselves in?
I think well, I don't know if it's a short-term solution or a long-term solution. I'll let others just listening to this decide. But I do think the way forward is a tiered system, but not just for the full members. I'm talking all the way through cricket. Why is
Hmm.
there not why is there not a divisional system in international cricket? So in the same way how you'd have the top six in the call it the international Premier League and then a Division One, have a Division Two. Have a Division Two, which may well have the associate sides in. And if that means in Division Two, someone like, I don't know, Ireland get relegated from Division One to Division Two and Scotland get promoted, so be it. Because
Hmm.
but the only way to make that work is you have to have a central fund. You have
Yeah.
to just pull the fund in, and here's my thing: India, England, and Australia can still take most of the pie if they want, but you just siphon off some of that to sustain everybody else playing Test cricket.
Hmm.
If you're honest about Test cricket still matters, it doesn't take a lot to fix it. Just siphon off a bit of the money and make sure that when Sri Lanka play Bangladesh or West Indies host Sri Lanka, money isn't lost. That's all you have to do. Just make sure that money isn't lost on the endeavor. So we work out how much does it cost to host a two-match test series for the weaker nations. Let's make sure the funding is there. Then we can go forward to the next part of the plan, which is that you do set up international windows. Anything that would
Hmm.
be like a test league would have to be probably over a 2 to 3 year period for it to really make sense, right? And you set aside international windows, but here's a problem with the international windows argument. I think that can obviously IPL will never go up against anybody else, so that's whatever. They'll get their 3 months as
Obviously.
usual. But
Yeah.
every other league would have to accept that they can't every other league would have to accept they can't have their own dedicated window that isn't challenged by anybody else. That's it.
Hmm.
So if we're going to talk international window, there has to be leagues competing against each other. So going forward, Major League Cricket and Caribbean Premier League and the 100 are all in the same window together. And if it dilutes their competition, so be it. Because if you want international cricket to matter, leagues can't dictate the market and say we want August and no one else should be in August, or we want
Hmm.
July and nobody else should be in July. Similar to what's happening right now. You've got what South Africa, the South African T20 thing, Bangladesh, that Dubai one.
Yeah.
What else is going on? Pakistan one is
I
due
mean,
to start very very soon.
and
So technically,
and the Big Bash League was on for quite a
yeah.
while till it ended. Yeah.
So they're all going up against each other. So you can call that the December to February
Hmm.
T20 market. Then February to the start of IPL, which is what now? May, should probably be an international window, right? Then May, IPL get their 3 month thing. Then you have the summer tournaments, 100, CPL, Major League Cricket, they get their one, right? In
Hmm.
that kind of August, July period. And then September to what probably
Well,
November is
end of,
would be another international period, because I can't remember
yeah.
what, there's probably something going on, but that would be another there's a Sri Lankan one somewhere in there, that would be another international period, right? And then I can't see how else it's going to work, because otherwise if we continue how we're continuing, all that's going to happen, because using that analogy, the toothpaste is out the tube now, right? So now we've
Mhm.
had South Africa send what looks like a B team to New Zealand, and West Indies send what looks like a B team to Australia. That's the norm now. Now it's been done,
Yeah.
and everyone's tutted their head and said, "Oh, that shouldn't be happening." Well, I'm sorry, folks, it happened, and guess what? Now we've done it once; it's gonna happen again. So, so,
Absolutely.
so
And,
if
and you
people
know where
don't
this
want that,
you
go
know
on.
where this gets complicated. Imagine throwing in a global ICC tournament into all of these windows that you just mentioned,
Oh,
and
I
bam.
forgot about that. I forgot about that.
Then you don't have a solution. But what I think should happen is that you play, or everyone plays Test cricket in a dedicated 3 to 4 month window in the year, and it's all part of one giant, umbrella where you market the umbrella that hey, this league is going on. It matters. It's
Yeah.
Test cricket. It's a league structure, and that way you'll have. I'm not saying you'll have the same amount of interest that you'll have for the Ashes as opposed to like a Bangladesh West Indies series, but at least it'll be part of that same umbrella. So you can say that, oh, these are the points, this is the structure, all of these test series are running concurrently, and this is how this league operates. That's the only
Mm.
way I see it survive, and I don't think that's going to happen, obviously. Unfortunately, maybe some of these nations will stop playing test cricket. Who's to say that doesn't happen?
That's a good point, though, you raise about selling it as a, because then you go to the TV
Hmm.
market, and
Yeah.
say, this is the International Premier League or whatever it might be called,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
that's you sell the whole package, not dissimilar to any sport, because yeah,
Hmm.
people probably want to watch India versus England or Australia, as is happening right now. There were
Yeah.
people when India England was on at the same time as Australia West Indies, people chose what they wanted to watch, and that's normal.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
normal. It's in the same window. Some went to watch India, England. And also, when people heard what was going on in the Australia Test match, a lot of people went to watch what's happening versus. That's how sport works, right?
Yep. I mean,
So
we
you
watch
just,
football like that, right? Multiple games
mm,
on at the same time.
yeah.
So I
So
think
it
that might
what
be a fix.
the problem is, you're talking sense. That's the actual problem. Like, come on, sense doesn't work in these situations.
Yeah, and I mean, it really does hurt because cricket is something that, well, in South Asia, in many nations, it's identity. And a lot of these people who are saying, "Oh, these West Indian players aren't motivated because they're not playing for their country." Look at the tears that came out of Brian Lara and Carl Hooper. Literally, he was overcome with emotion. Right? You can't tell me they're not motivated. Go watch Fire in Babylon, and you'll know how much cricket means to the West Indies. Right? And the supporters are robbed because of the way the game is run, not because of what the players choose to do, because they've got to look for their own livelihood. So yeah, it's quite unfortunate, and I think a lot of good, productive conversation came out of this podcast. Though I hope the listeners have been enriched.
Yeah, I would hope so. But we're all. There's also going to be people who say we don't know what we're talking about, but that's all good. That's all good because that's the whole point of these podcasts. Let's get some conversation going and see if we can find a consensus that does a better job than the ICC are doing at the moment.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that we would be able to do a better job than the ICC if given the power. But to all the listeners, of course, if you have any ideas, if you have some agreements, disagreements, let us know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for your time, Machel. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about this particular topic. And yeah, best of luck to both you and the Caribbean Cricket Podcast.
No worries, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yep. And everyone should also go and subscribe to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast because they do some amazing work. And if you are at all interested in West Indian cricket, well, that is a one-stop shop over there for you, right over there. So go ahead and do that right now. And if you enjoyed this content, like this video, subscribe to Grassroots Cricket, and stay tuned for similar content because we're doing our level best to bring intelligent cricket conversations to you. So support our cause, and yeah, just stay tuned for the next video. We have a lot planned these days on Grassroots Cricket. Till then, goodbye.